You're listening to Adoptees On, the podcast where adoptees discuss the adoption experience. This is Season 2, Episode 2, John. I'm your host, Haley Radke. I have just a couple of things to chat about before we get started today. I know some of you have heard my husband was just laid off from his job of over 10 years. And I want to thank you so very much for all of your kind notes you've been sending me over social media. We appreciate your support so much. Speaking of support, I have been blessed to welcome 4 new partners of the show. You ladies know exactly who you are, and I will respect your privacy, but thank you times a million. In a time like this where things feel very uncertain, knowing that you're able to partner up with me, that just means everything. So if you're wanting to join these 4 generous women, I'd love to have you as a partner too. You can see all your options at adopteeson.com/partner. Okay, last thing before we jump into this interview, I want to remind you I'm doing a listener survey. It's like 2 minutes max to find out just a little bit more about you. And you can give me your thoughts and comments on the show, and that will help me tailor the podcast exactly towards the things you'd like to hear. You can find it on adopteeson.com/survey, and you will be entered to win an awesome prize pack of recommended resources as my thank you gift. That's adopteeson.com/survey. Today's interview with John is really special to me. I don't want to spoil anything for you. So the only thing I want to mention before we get to his story is that John's birth mother has secondary infertility, meaning that she was never able to have another child after relinquishing John. I understand that this is actually fairly common with first moms, and it's just one more heartbreaking cost of adoption that society doesn't ever hear about. This is my bad. I totally forgot to ask John about this, so you'll hear us chat a bit about her and his relationship with her, but this piece of information I think will help you understand that section a bit better. We wrap up with recommending 2 podcasts for you, so stick around for that. And as always, links to all of the things we'll be talking about today are on the website adopteeson.com. All right, let's listen in. I'm so pleased to welcome to Adoptees On, John. Thanks for agreeing to share your story with us.
Well, thank you for having me.
Oh, it's my honor. I would just love it if you would just start out and tell us your adoption story.
I was born during the mid-'60s. At the time, I wasn't aware that I was given up. I didn't learn until much later in life, till about around 10 years old, and I'll go a little bit more into that as we go. But I was given up in Colorado. My birth mom had a relationship with another individual, and she, of course, got pregnant with me and told her family, of the pregnancy, and immediately her parents was quite upset when the time was getting close for my arrival, if you want to call it arrival. Place her into a home of unwed mothers. The birth father didn't want to have anything to do with the pregnancy, kind of just left it up on her own. And so it was kind of fed to her. And there was a little discussion at the time, when I learned much later, that maybe one of her siblings might adopt me, but that didn't come to pass. So she had me out of wedlock, was placed into a home of unwed mothers. She had me. One of the interesting things I found out much later, after we discovered each other, was that she put a requirement through the adoption agency that when I would turn 18, that my records would be open to me to find her. So she wanted me to locate her at a much later date and discover each other. And so she was quite upset at the time when I turned 18, thinking this would come about, but it didn't. So anyway, there was a period of time where I did not know where I went to or what, but my adoptive parents adopted me about 9 months later went through the adoption process. My adopted mom couldn't have children of her own, and so came to be, and parents went through the adoption agency, and I was taken in.
So you say there's 9 months where you don't know where you were.
Yeah, don't know where I was, who I was with, how I was cared for. And, after learning more and doing research and talking to other adoptees is, the studies of that first year when a child is born and, that bonding process, I just wonder if that's something part of my makeup of me not having that. I don't know, but it's certainly something I'm always kind of curious about.
I'm sure. Yeah. Yeah. So it sounds really like traditional baby scoop, except I haven't heard that before. A birth mother requesting the age 18 to share records. I mean, I wonder if that's something the agency promised, but they weren't actually going to deliver on, right?
Yeah, probably not, because, at the time, all those records were sealed, and it didn't matter which side wanted them open. They were going to keep them sealed. Only recently, and one of the things I think for your podcast is what I learned, being that I was born in Colorado, that they just recently opened those records. I've been toying with it, request those records. I haven't done it yet. It's still an emotional roller coaster for me, but that's one of the things I want to know. And eventually, when I get that courage to do it, I'll send for the records, and maybe they'll show that, and maybe they'll also show that request in there too. I'm not sure.
Oh, that would be interesting. Okay, so did your adoptive parents adopt any other children?
They did. I have a sister. They adopted her a year later. And again, at the time, we both didn't know we were adopted. We were just treated, as their own. And not too much later time did we find out we were adoption. And it's quite painful to me too, because it was such a traumatic event for me.
Yeah. Tell us how you found out.
My family, or my father, was in government service, so we moved quite a lot at the time. And then there was a time where I was around 7 years of age. Again, we had a normal kind of family background, nothing too traumatic. But at the time, around 7 years old, we ended up in Maryland, and my grandmother from my adopted father came to live with us. Her husband had passed away. Again, not knowing a lot of things of the family background, not knowing this past that occurred, I'm just doing normal childhood activities with my friends. And one day, my friends just started teasing me out of the blue. It was just really weird. It was just, they just started saying I was adopted, and, you're kind of like, hate to use the term bastard child, but that was kind of words and toying with me. And I'm like, I'm getting quite upset. And I'm like, why are you even saying these things? And, and of course I'm arguing back. Like, no, I'm not. And then they said, no, your grandmother told our parents. And I'm like, what? So immediately I ran home to my mom, and I just laid it on the line. And she said something very bluntly, like, not even a second thought. She says, well, your grandmother, she drinks. And I'm like, oh yeah, she does. You're absolutely right. And then at the time, I never thought about questioning what my mother was saying to me. I just believed everything that she said to me. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. So I didn't think of it a second thought. I just went on my way, and that was kind of like the last time my friends even were teasing me. So didn't think much of it till about 2 to 3 years later, till I got about 10 years old. And we moved again. And now, you get to the age of curiosity, and I seen this lockbox that I've never seen before. And I'm like, hey, what's in this? And so I open up, and Lord behold, there was my adoption decree, saying, hereby known on this date, November, your name is changed from Derek to John. And I'm like, I was just floored. I was like, that's the day I will never forget. And there's this other there was two papers. One was the adoption decree, and this other one was this little description of my birth parents. And I stared at that for like hours on end. It was not much of description, just saying a little bit of background of my birth mother and father, just what their educational level was, their height, their religious background, and what their hobbies was. And that was it. That's the only information I had. And I immediately went to tell my sister of this, and she was floored as well. But she handled it a lot differently. She internalized it, while me, I struck out. Immediately went to my adopted mom, and I was just crying like no end, and then yelling. And it was just back and forth, and she didn't know what to do. She didn't say anything. She didn't take me aside. She didn't discuss how it came to be. And she had no words for me. A couple of hours later, my father came home, and I immediately started yelling at him too. I don't have to listen to you. You're not my real father. And again, no comforting words from either one of them. It was just left up to me to figure it out on my own of what has happened, how I came to be in this world. And then from there, all the fantasy starts going through your head. Maybe my parents were, I don't know, killed in a car accident and I was saved, or, maybe I was born from celebrities and, they can't have, every little fantasy you think of, you start coming about. And from that time forward, my relationship with my adopted parents had changed for good. Anything discussion-wise with my mom, I couldn't trust her. I couldn't believe anything she would have said. And then things I started noticing, and then having more discussions with my sister about things. But we've seen things that from other families with mothers and how they raised their children and the love that they would give in discussions and communications between each other was just not there with my adopted parents. There was never, and then at the time I didn't think of it, but at the time there was no, I love you, I miss you, or, how are things going? It was just more like a regiment system. Here's food on the table. Here's clothing. Here is take you to school. I mean, they weren't bad parents. They didn't whip me, or treat me and miss badly. It was just there was no love there, and it's hard to say at the time.
Mm-hmm. Was there ever any discussion after that, even years later, about why they chose not to tell you?
There was never ever a discussion of why they never chose to not tell us in the beginning or hide it from us. It was not like I would suspect that, maybe at another time when we were a teenager, at a time that maybe we can understand. There was never ever had that discussion. And every so often, I would have these emotional outbreaks because I was a lost child. I was completely lost. At one time, I felt like this is who I was. This is where I grew up. This is who my family was. This is my history. One of the things they named me after my father's middle name and his grandfather's middle name. So it showed a little history where I come. And then after that, my genealogy just went out the window and I just didn't know who I was anymore. And it's weird to say that. It was rough. And, and then at the time, a couple years later, my parents went through a difficult time between their own relationship. My father became an alcoholic and decided to leave the family. And so it was just my adopted mom just raising my sister and I, and then I became this kind of rebellious kid to the point where I wasn't rebellious where a criminal like that. I just that anything my mom would say to me, I didn't listen to her. I mean, I would still do schoolwork. I would still go attend school, still try to be a good student. But between our relationship, that there was none. I just couldn't trust anything she had said to me, and from there forward, I actually would catch her in other lies. She was just an individual that rather instead of have a strict communications of like, hey, this is on the mother, on the parent, this is how things are, she would make up lies to get away from those difficult conversations, if that makes sense.
Well, it sounds kind of manipulative. I mean, I'm kind of flabbergasted, honestly, John. I can't believe it. It's like, how can you not tell your kid? But there's a lot of late discovery adoptees, people that find out when they're adults. Some when they find out when their parents die and their adoptive parents die, and they go through their files and they're like, what is this? Like,
and that's unbelievable. And how you go through just life going to a doctor, like, well, how's your, do you have a history of cancer in your family? And ever since then, I'm like, I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. And then for those adoptees that don't know until after their parents have, I can't imagine.
I mean, age 10, like, that's really uprooting you, just like you said.
It's certainly an age where you're impressible. That's not a good word. Impressionable. Sometimes I think about when is the good age to tell an individual that, hey, this is it. And the more I think about it, I just think it's when you start talking to your child, you should, have some type of discussion or there's got to be some type of counseling that's got to be involved to inform the child that they have been adopted, what information they have, and constantly care for that individual, and then provide them outside counseling to understand emotions that they're going through. There's no simple answer. but I think it maybe if my adopted mom would have been straightforward from the get-go, when that first day came about, when I asked that question, prior to me reading it, looking at finding it in a lockbox, and she, take me aside or something like that, and showed love and things. I'm certainly going to have feelings of loss, but I feel I'm going to have that safety net still, and it's still, even to this day, when my birth mother and I found each other, I try to have that discussion with my adoptive mom, and she just won't have that discussion at all. She just said, that's part of your life. That's not part of mine, which hurts me deeply. Here I'm trying to have a communication with her, and, if you're going to raise a son, you just can't split parts that you just want to know. It encompasses everything, and just not the parts where they just want to be part of. So, I mean, even to this day, that still hurts, and she just won't have that discussion. After my father left, he was dealing with his own personal demons, and it wasn't too much later where he found himself that, hey, he has an alcoholic problem, and he found himself, to get counseling, go through AA, go through the 10-step process. And he tried to amend, one of those steps is trying to amend with the people that you hurt. And it was when I became adult, and, I had my own family, my lovely wife as of today, and the children. And he reached out to a time when I was around, I believe I was around 24 or 25, and I felt obligated that, here, he should know that he has grandchildren, he should know that he has a daughter-in-law. And so I allowed him to come meet, and that in itself was very difficult for me. One, just part of the adoption, but also part of the, my own adopted father left us. I kind of had to fend for myself as a growing boy without a father, and I had to deal with those demons. And so we tried to reconnect. He tried. I don't fault him in that, but I at the time I wasn't emotionally ready to accept his apology. I allowed him to be part of my son's life, but as far as communications, I just wasn't emotionally ready to accept him yet. And so we just kind of went our own separate ways. Is about the easiest way to say things. We try to every so often still do Christmas cards, stuff like that. But after that, we kind of just broke communications until I called my adopted mom. One thing I always done. I always called her for Thanksgiving, Christmas, and I called her one day at Thanksgiving, and she notified me that, hey, your father's been trying to reach out to you. He wanted to let you know that, he's got a terminal disease and wanted to give his contact information. And of course, my mom, to be the way she is, she just says, I don't know if you can trust them or not, but I'm like, okay, I very much doubt if someone's calling you saying they're dying, that they're making it up. But again, that's just the way she is. And so I took the information, and I talked to my sister too, and she had already reached out and started communications with them. And I started communications with them, and I tried to have communications about what happened, what did he knew of my birth parents, and I found him to be credible during those discussions a little bit. He didn't know much, and he just said, we went through an agency and we adopted you. Now this is through a 3-week period before his ultimate death. It was a very short period of communications and went by so quickly. But because of the past relationship that we had with each other, I couldn't go see him. I couldn't drive and meet up with him in the hospital. My sister did. I'm very thankful for my sister for her doing that, give him that opportunity. But I couldn't go through that emotional roller coaster. So we just strictly kept it to communication through telephone calls. About 3 days before his death, we had this is going to be really emotional to me too right now. Mm-hmm. We had our last call, and he just said something which to this day was unbelievable, just unbelievable. Again, we got back on the subject of my adoption and my sister's adoption, and he just flatly just came out and just said, "Look, John, your mother didn't want you. It was I that pushed for adoption, and she doesn't love you, and she never did, and she didn't want to care for you." And I was like, I just became quiet. I'm like, and I'm just burning up inside and just eating up inside. I'm like, how dare you say this for the individual that left us, our family, when we were 12 or 13 years old when he left, and to say such a hateful thing on your deathbed. It just floored. It was just unbelievable. And that was our last communication, was that little bit of information. We didn't talk anything after that. I just said, okay, thank you. I didn't argue with him on it. I didn't say, how dare you, I'm not going to start yelling at someone on their deathbed. But to have their last communication to me to say that someone doesn't want you. Yeah, it was traumatic to learn how to be adopted, and traumatic my relationship with my mother and my father, but it was unbelievable. And after that call, of course, I talked to my sister. My sister and I had good communications, and my sister took the opposite approach. She was like, "That's absolutely, you know how our mother is. She doesn't love us. She doesn't show us love." And my argument back to her was like, "Well, that could be. She grew up made up in an area that within her own family didn't have that loving support." And I'm trying to give her a little bit more benefit of the doubt here, but my argument always been like, she didn't have to continue to support us. She could have just gave us up to the state if she didn't want us. How dare our dad say something in his final last words? And so my sister, from that day forward, stopped all communications with our adopted mom, and me kind of took the more load of communicating with her. And so after that communication with my sister, I took it upon myself to fly out to my adopted mom, have a 4-day little mini vacation with her. And one evening, I just basically told her what's happened with the communications with our adopted father. And again, she's one for little words, but I could tell she got visibly upset about what was presented to us. She didn't defend herself saying, no, that's not the case or anything like that. She just got, as she always done, just got completely quiet, didn't know what to say. And she came back. We came back to the house because I said this kind of over dinner. Maybe that was not the right place to do it out in public.
Oh, at a restaurant?
Yeah, at a restaurant. That was probably not the best place for me to throw this at her, but I didn't know any other way to do it. And we went back to her place, and she showed me some letters that my sister wrote to her. And from there, she just won't ever talk about it. And as I explained before, after discovery and reunion with my birth mother, she just won't discuss it with me. She won't have any communications about it. There was only one time I remember her actually willing to actually help in searching for my birth parents. It was when I was like 17 years old. I was going through an emotional time at that time again. And, I brought it up, and she said, well, I'm willing to help you and assist, but I didn't want, at that time, I think 16 and 17, I'm so rebellious. I didn't want anyone help, especially her help. And so I just let it go. But that was difficult, and still difficult to this day to deal with those emotions with my adopted parents.
I'm sure. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry that those things happened, and it's very upsetting for your adoptive father to end your relationship like that, just before he passed away. That's very sad.
Thank you. But yeah, no son or adopted or birth son should ever have that kind of communication with her father.
No. Oh my goodness. So right now it sounds like things are like, are you still in relationship with your adoptive mom, but kind of surface level and infrequent? Is that kind of?
Yeah, I check on her at least monthly with her just to make sure she's doing well, things are going, but they're like 5-minute, 10-minute phone calls at the best.
Yeah.
They're just very quick. How are things? What do you got new going on down there? How's your health? Kind of thing. Not we have never got into deep communications on any type of subject. It's all just like you say, superficial kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
How's the weather? How's retirement? Things like that.
Yeah.
But anything of substance, forget it. And then, and partially me to blame too. Like I said, it's hard for me to have a substance conversation with her because I don't know I can trust what she's telling me is true or not. And so I try not to get into the things where I would have to think is she's telling me the truth, or do I have to find to prove it not?
Yeah, that's really tainted everything.
And it's sad too, because I want to share part of with this reunion and tell her, explain the feelings I'm going through on this other side, and she just doesn't want to deal with it. So,
well, we would love to hear the story. So why don't you share with us?
so this is not the typical way of searching and discovering your birth parents. So I'm kind of very lucky of how this came about. It's a very happy story, I can say. It wasn't a traditional way of searching and discovering. So, growing up, I always wanted to know where I came from, but I didn't have the nerve to go search. I didn't know how to go search. When I was growing up in the late 70s and early 80s, we didn't have the internet at the time. I was living in Pennsylvania, which is worlds away from where I was born at in Colorado. I didn't know how to go about it. Plus, I was really scared about what I would find. I didn't know, you have those happy thoughts of like, oh, this is how I was given up or relinquished, but then I also had the other side of the thought process of that, oh my God, maybe they were, I don't know, drug addicts and, bang, I was concerned on the both sides because I already went through this one side, and I'm already had this difficult relationship with my own mom and father, and I didn't want to find out it could be worse. So I didn't take an active role in searching, but every so often I would just have these urges. I need to know, I need to find out. And so in the early 90s, the internet started to come about, and before the internet, you had these online services with CompuServe, Prodigy, American Online, like I Got Mail. And so one of the services I signed up for was Prodigy, and they had this little forum, this little group of adoptees searching for their birth parents. And it wasn't much of a forum. It was more like a database. And you would just put your information in there. You would just put in where you were born, what day you were born, the city you were born, and your contact information. And so I just left that one day, just like, this is not the time now where I'm worried about stalkers getting my information. But at the time, I just threw it in there that, I was born in Colorado, gave my information up. And, when you first do it, you're kind of constantly looking at the form. Oh, someone replied, no. And you see other people posting, and after a while, you just kind of like, all right, you get discouraged. Okay, you tried. And I just came about, well, if someone's searching, then hopefully they would look at this as well. So I didn't think much of it after a couple months, 3 months, just kind of forgot about it. And 4 years later, literally around 4 years later, I was coming home from work, coming up in a driveway, and my wife just suddenly bolts out the door onto the driveway and waving me down. I'm like, oh my God, something's wrong with the kid, because she had never done that before. And she just said, I just talked to your birth mother. I'm like, what? I got very quiet, got very shy. I just talked to your birth mom. And, thank God my wife took that phone call because she said, look, I verified everything. I verified, things that I wouldn't even be thinking of doing. She was posing all these questions just to make sure that it was her. And she explained it, and I was starting to break down. I'm like, oh my God, oh my God. What do I do? Every emotion that came out of me from the last, by now I was, this was 97. So I was in the mid 30s. I was just weep with emotions. And she said, well, she's going to call back in 30 minutes, which gave me time to kind of compose myself a little bit and think how I was going to handle this. Anyway, so she called it back in 30 minutes. She explained how she got my information from that Prodigy Online service from 4 years ago, that she just went in there and found it, and she couldn't believe it. And as I explained earlier, during a phone call, she said she requested the adoption agency, to open up the adoption records when I turned 18. And it was such a heartful moment between each other. She explained what happened, how it came to be, how, she just, through all these years from my birth, just had this love for me. She was thrilled to death. I was thrilled to death. It was very emotional, not knowing what to say, how to say things. I kind of let her run the things. And she talked all about her family. She talked about her parents. One thing she stressed a lot on is not to get upset with her parents, because it was a different time at that time. She was concerned that, she didn't want me to hate them for, putting in a home of unwed mothers. She talked about her siblings and her family history, and it was just unbelievable. And from there on, we talked almost every day. We started exchanging emails. And then I got this. Well, let me back up for a second. So after that phone call, of course, I called my sister. That was the first person I think I called, was my sister. And the first thing she said to me after I told her the story, she said, does this mean you're no longer my brother? Oh. And I just oh my God, no. This doesn't mean, this doesn't change anything. I will always be your brother. It was just such a heartful thing for her to say. And then I called my adopted mom next. And true to form that she is, she just says, well, are you absolutely certain? And I tried to explain how we verified everything. And she said, well, make sure she's not after your money. And I'm like, okay, thank you. Thank you for that heartful, emotional support to give me. And the third thing she just said, don't tell your grandmother, her mom, which my grandmother is the most lovely person on earth. But absolutely, I didn't do that. But that was the three things she advised me through it all. And after those phone calls and emails, there was a lot of discussion about, what my history was, what happened to me, what her history was. And then after that, I got a ton of letters from her family side. I got letters from her mom. She was battling the disease at the time, where she was losing her memory at the time. But it was such a heartful letter to receive from my birth grandmother from this. And then these letters from her siblings. It's just all these welcoming letters to me. It was unbelievable, the communications that had occurred. In a million years, I would never have guessed to have a reunion as loving as that was. It was unbelievable, these heartful letters I was getting. And then her brother lived close to us on the East Coast, and he opened our home for us to come visit him and meet him and his family. And I declined because I said, look, as much as I appreciate your offer, the first person I need to meet is my birth mother.
Yes.
And so he understood that. And he was gracious about it. And then one thing I didn't kind of disclose, but I was in the military at the time. And so in the military, you get transferred every 3 to 4 years. And the year that, we found each other was a year of my transfer again. So I got transferred to Virginia, and my birth mother raised enough money through her own friends and family where she lived at. She lived in Idaho, and flew out that summer to meet me and my family, and stayed for 3 days. And it was a wonderful occasion. I couldn't be more blessed. The only thing I'll say about all the communications we had from that spring where we discovered each other through that summer where she had her first visit, one of the things I never did, and I never asked who the birth father was, what kind of individual he was. I didn't know how to handle that. And the same struggles I had before was I didn't know if I wanted to know. I still don't know. I never asked those questions. I never probed those questions. I'm just concerned maybe that might be offensive to ask those questions. I don't know. So I kind of took off of a stand-offish, that's a good word to use, about not knowing that side yet. But so she came out, and one of the things from her family side they do is they have family reunions every 3 years. And her parents, her father, my grandfather, was sibling to 3 other brothers. And so these 4 brothers would get together and have these family reunions, big family reunions. They're Midwestern family reunions. And the following year, they invited me and my family to this reunion. Well, let me step back. So my birth mom comes out. We have this lovely reunion. And then the following summer, I was invited to meet her parents and her siblings and my cousins back in Colorado. And so my family took a week-long drive across the country to meet them, and it was a wonderful reunion. And of course, I was scared out of my wits. Didn't know what to say, didn't know what to do, didn't know how to communicate. I just kind of let things flow how it was. It was great. And if anything, they were just so opening and loving. And I'm more probably the standoffish guy. Like, I didn't want to ruin anything. I didn't want to scare anything. I wasn't after anything. I just wanted to know who they were and their personalities and their history. And so we did that mini reunion. Then the following year, I went to their big reunion, and it was even more love from that side with the other brothers and the other second cousins and third cousins. It's and every 3 years we get invited again, and communicate even more, through Facebook and through Christmas cards, and it's incredible. It's hard to describe the openness that side of the family has shown to me and towards my wife and family.
That's so beautiful.
Yes, but it's scary on the other side too. There's things that come about where I didn't had to think about, and I don't know if it's right for me to think about these things. This past summer, my birth mom was asking a little bit more personal information about, Social Security numbers, and wanting me to put me on her life insurance. And I was like, huh? I really didn't want that. I didn't, but I felt like, look, if that's what she wants, that makes her happy. Okay. But I was really concerned of doing that, and even saying, well, I don't, I don't feel comfortable, but yet I didn't want not to please her. So at the end, I'm like, okay, if it makes you happy, kind of thing. But I just felt like, oh my God, now I have these other obligations. I don't know. Those are things I struggle with a little bit, compared to my adopted mom. I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it totally makes sense. You're trying to weave your family of origin back together, and those are things that are tricky in a regular, I don't know how to say that, a regular family.
Right. Even with a regular family, you have those discussions. And when you have it from another side, where I'm like, I don't know how to handle this. And my wife was so supportive. Well, do what you feel is best. And I'm like, well, it can't hurt me, I guess. But I didn't. Again, I've always come across that. Look, I'm not here for anything, except for understanding and to get to know this family and be, and slowly I'm becoming part of it. Even this past fall, my birth mom still lives in Idaho, but we've moved back to Colorado. And so I still see some of my cousins out here, and then my uncle and aunt. And we did a little family outing together, and where we went up to the mountains, and they introduced me to one of their longtime friends as my nephew. And I'm like, that was just like, I was like, wow, to hear them introduce me as their nephew. And it was just unbelievable. I'm over 50 years old, and to be introduced that way, just put giddiness inside me like that. Like, wow, that's awesome.
I can relate to that because I remember the first time that my bio dad introduced me to someone as his daughter.
And that's special.
Yeah. Yeah, it is. Yeah. I'm so happy that you've had this positive experience, because it seemed like you had so much hurt when you were younger. So I'm so glad for you.
It's amazing how things sometimes occur, and but it's not. I still deal with emotional things and the loss and understanding of my own biological makeup kind of thing. As we grow.
Are you comfortable at all talking about any of the effects that you might have experienced that you would relate back to the trauma of adoption? You were just saying that there's things you're trying to reconcile, and the feelings and those things. Are you comfortable talking a little bit about that?
I have a hard time, and this is maybe a little obvious, is trust. When I first meet new friends or individuals or people in work, I have a hard time trusting anything without like verification kind of thing. And I guess it's the systems of the adoption and not being open to me from that. And then part of it is, and I don't know if it's because I lacked that bonding when I initially was born and I was somewhere for 9 months, but I have this awful concern of every time I meet someone that an insecurity about myself of, will they like me? Did I say something wrong to that individual? How do I come across that individual? So it's a very lack of insecurity on my part that I deal with every day in family manners and friendship manners and even professional manners. I'm constantly judging myself on those things, and it's difficult at times, because sometimes I think it's, instead of just proceeding and acting in a normal way, I'm catching myself and reanalyzing, thinking things, and I just should just be myself and just not worry of those things. It's like this open wound in me that just never heals. I don't know. I had gone to a couple counseling sessions, and I still remember the first one. That was just scary. That was unbelievable. I remember after the end of the session, the counselor just kind of said that, look, you're going to kill yourself. I'm like, what? You need more help than I can. And that just threw me through a loop. That was just unbelievably counseling session. And then I had another one that had a little bit more understanding, but still, I don't know if they got the abreast of the emotions I've gone through.
It's really hard to find a counselor or a therapist that gets it. It's hard to find a good fit anyway, and then add on the layers of adoption and all of those things. It's hard.
Right. And then a father, mm-hmm. It was, you try to throw it in 1 hour. I kind of wonder on the other end how the counselors take it in all at that time and how to weave through something where myself been dealing with over years on years of painful information stuck inside me that I'm trying to navigate through. It's difficult.
But that's a good point. It's years and years, and we just can't unpack that in such a short time. Like, there's multiple probably multiple years of work to undo those things. Oh, and my dog's back. How perfect timing. Okay. Breaks up the deepness. I don't know.
Yes.
You're like, okay, we're done with the feelings.
Oh, bring me up.
Okay.
Bring me back.
Well, is there anything else that we didn't touch on that you want to get to or share with us?
I don't think so. As I take a deep, heavy breath.
You're like, I'm going to make an appointment for tomorrow. So.
Yeah.
Oh, goodness. Ooh. Yeah. Okay. Well, I really appreciate you sharing those insights with us, because often we cover those things up and we pretend like everything's okay, but the things that we experience in childhood affect us for a really long time. And I'm still thinking about your 9 months, and I hope you do get an answer for that at some point.
I talked about my sister who's also adopted, and I talked to her about if she wanted to search and look for her biological parent. And always at the time, she's very quick to come back and said no. She just absolutely not. She wanted me. If they wanted me, they wouldn't have given me up. She's changed a little bit after seeing the positive effects that has occurred with me and my reunion with my birth mother and her family. They're friends on Facebook. And so, and then she sees some of the photos. I always worried about some of the photos that come out because I don't want to hurt her. Again, to exclude her. She's still my sister and always will be my sister. And just recently, and I explained to her, listening to this podcast of, hey, if you like, we can, go look through, put the form through and open up your records. And I provided her that information. And she hasn't done it yet. She really would rather me do. And I explained to her, I said, look, I can't sign the form for you.
Yeah.
You have to sign the form. I can submit it, but you have to do it. But it's kind of opened me up now too, as well, of finding and discovering a little bit more of my past. And again, the wonderfulness of your podcast of just listening and hearing other people's stories has opened me up even a lot further than it had previously. It's just a wonderful thing.
Oh, I'm so glad. Well, maybe that sounds like something you and your sister can do together. You can both fill out your paperwork together. It's family activity.
That's true. That's true. Think of it that way.
Okay, well, speaking of loving podcasts, let's move into our recommended resource segment, because I think we both have podcasts to recommend.
Yes.
Okay.
I'm a podcast junkie.
Me too. That is one reason I started the show, because I'm an addict, and now it's just one extra way to get podcasts in my life. Okay, so the podcast I have to recommend is called Born in June, Raised in April. Have you heard this podcast before, John?
No, I haven't.
Okay, well, I just discovered it, and I don't know why, because now that I've discovered it, I've seen other people post about it, and I think, where was I? So it's done by April Dinwiddie. On her website, she identifies as, it says, April Dinwiddie is a nationally recognized thought leader on adoption and foster care, and she is the chief executive of the Donaldson Adoption Institute, which you probably have seen some posts by them. Anyway, once you hear that name, you'll see it kind of everywhere. But April Dinwiddie, her podcast that she does is, like I said, it's born in June, raised in April, because her given name at birth was June, and then her adoptive parents changed her name to April. And it's a monthly show, and it's between 10 to 15 minutes long. And there are these little vignettes. April just does could be a story from when she was younger, and she weaves it together with her adoption journey, and it could be about her search. There's all these different little topics that she has each month, and it's been out for a year, so there's 12 or 13 episodes at the time that we're recording, and it's very nicely produced. The sound is excellent, and it's just one more way to get to know a fellow adoptee. I'm really enjoying it, if you can tell. So
yeah, I definitely have to subscribe to that.
So the only problem is, because they're only 10 to 15 minutes, it will not take you very long to binge listen. So
well, that's good, because there's some times where some podcasts are like 2 hours. Like, okay, my drive's not that long.
Well, speaking of podcasts with a large catalog that you'll never catch up on, what's your recommendation?
Yeah. So one of the podcasts that I first discovered, because I was looking for kind of like a self-help kind of thing of different other individuals that go through emotional things, and so I came across this one called the Mental Illness Happy Hour, and I just love that title, Happy Hour. It's by a comedian named Paul Gilmartin. They are a little bit lengthy podcasts. They come out weekly, and he interviews different individuals. Sometimes he interviews therapists and counselors too, so those are informative. But he interviews a lot of individuals that are going through disorders, mental illness, as kind of like the title of the podcast goes. And besides interviews, he also does emails from listeners, which it's actually quite interesting to hear, because these little email segments are really quick to the point. It's not like they'll just have like 2 or 3 sentences of some situation that they're occurring that I can relate to and stuff like that. Not all the podcasts are relatable. Some deal with drug abuse, alcohol abuse, sexual abuse, things that are some deep things. But then there's other things where, I can relate with insecurities that I deal with at times, and I can understand what the other individuals go and think of those things in my own life.
Mm-hmm. Are there any episodes in particular that you remember that were really meaningful to you?
There are a lot. I don't know how many years he's been doing this now.
Well, I scrolled back through the feed when you had emailed me that you were going to recommend it, and I was like, whoa, there's so many. But so they're titled that it would be easy to look for something specific, yes, like depression or anxiety. So if there's one particular issue, like you were saying, someone could find a specific thing if they just kind of scroll back through.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it now, and he's up to 314 of these. But you're right; they're very much titled. One has social worker in training, one learning to love myself. And then some counselors, as I said, my suicide attempt as a wake-up call. It's a variety of different issues. And again, he's a very good host. He's very clear. And it's somewhat enjoyable. He's not trying to make fun or light of it, but yet he's raising these issues with a little flair of comedian into it. So, but don't take it like, oh, this is a comedic happy hour kind of thing. It's not that at all. It's not a joke every 2 seconds.
Right. Just like this show is not all happy reunion stories.
Right.
I think people will have the full range of emotions when they listen to your story today.
Well, I hope they enjoy it.
I'm sure they will. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you for your candor with us. I know that everyone will find great value in hearing your story, so thank you.
Well, thank you. And thank you for all the hard work you put into this podcast.
It's my honor. That's my my tagline, I guess. If people want to connect with you online, where can we find you?
I am on Twitter. I have a weird username kind of thing. I am a huge John Wayne fan. He was kind of like my role model growing up, that, my imagine, like, if I want to try to be someone, and maybe this is a lot for people growing up in the 60s and 70s to have a role model, mine was John Wayne. And so I kind of use his movie title of X True Grit X is my Twitter handle.
That's so perfect. I love that. Now I know why you're called that. Oh, that's so good. Okay, well, I will link to all of these things in the show notes so people can find you on Twitter and find those shows that we talked about. Thank you again for your time. I'm so pleased to get to share your story with our listeners.
So thank you.
Please don't forget to do that listener survey for me. It's just 2 minutes and you will have a chance to win 3 of our recommended resources. So go right now, adopteeson.com/survey. And I really, really want to be able to hear more of your stories, but there's almost a year-long waitlist to be a guest on the podcast. So another way you can share your story with me is in our secret Facebook group. I'm building this safe space for you guys, and if you love the show and want to join me in building this adoptee community, I would be honored if you would partner with me. There's some amazing rewards in it for you, like access to that secret Facebook group, and adopteeson.com/partner has all the details. And if you have any questions about it at all, send me a note on the adopteeson.com website. My very last thing for today, would you tell just one person about Adoptees On? Perhaps you know another adoptee that struggles in relationship with their adoptive parents. Maybe hearing John's story will help them know they aren't alone. Thanks for listening. Let's talk again next Friday.